What's up, what's up? Ako si Budilpin. Ito, manananghalian ha. Nanghalian tayo. Ito yung ulam ko. Tsaka ito, salad.
Hundreds of women displaced by the violence in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo have been protesting in the city of Goma, demanding an end to the fighting between the M23 rebel group and government troops. The Congolese government of the group Rwanda supporting the group, which Kigali denies. While the conflict in the DRC is one of the issues being discussed at the African Union Summit in Ethiopia. Leaders have gathered in Addis Ababa for the first day of high-level talks there. The Tariq-e-Taliban Pakistan has claimed responsibility for an attack on a police headquarters in Karachi, which killed at least 2 officers and 1 civilian. Local media report that there was a heavy exchange of gunfire between police and the attackers who stormed the compound. South Korea's military has accused North Korea of firing a ballistic missile towards the sea off its east coast. The reported launch comes one day after Pyongyang threatened strong action against South Korea and the United States over new joint military drills. Cleanup is underway in New Zealand after a cyclone ravaged the east coast. The storm made landfall in the North Island on Monday, killing at least 9 people and thousands are still missing. The weather is forecast, though, to improve during the weekend. Well, those are the headlines. There'll be more news here on Al Jazeera.
Yung tawag dito, ano? Gerger ang tawag dito.
The American people have spoken, but what exactly did they say? Is the world looking for a whole new
Masarap din siya ilahalo sa munggo.
agenda on the decline in America? How much do social media companies know about you, and how easy is it to manipulate?
A critical look at US politics, the bottom line.
Ito ang salad ko. May polyo, gerger, saka sibuyas. Inuhan ko ng toyo at saka suka.
Hello, I'm Marlene Saeed. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera. You'll look
Bus na.
at the world of business and economics. This week, reconstruction efforts after earthquakes in Turkey and Syria could cost billions of dollars. That bill is likely to worsen Turkey's already struggling economy. So, how will the country cope? Also this week, people in northwestern Syria feel abandoned by the world after the devastating earthquakes. The UN has increased its aid deliveries to the war-torn country, but is it too little too late? Nearly a year after Russia invaded Ukraine, the nation's economy is wrecked.
Ang gusto ko sa pritong isda, medyo malutong, crispy.
Is it enough to keep the entire country going? Turkey's worst earthquakes in nearly a century have killed tens of thousands of people, flattened entire city blocks,
Dilis,
and wrecked
tuyo.
businesses. Response efforts are shifting to coping with the aftermath and providing shelter, food, and medical help to survivors. The Turkish president has promised to rebuild affected areas within a year. He's allocating more than $5 billion for initial disaster relief, with cash handouts for families. But business groups say the total restoration bill could exceed $84 billion. Bristol Sedo reports.
Life has come to a
Ang lasa itong gerger, parang ano, mga pait-pait.
struck last week,
Ay po,
and nothing symbolizes that more than this clock tower, a landmark of the city.
medyo mapait.
The clock stopped when the place shook the region. Like many others here, Javid Dijde has sent his family members to Istanbul because of the devastation.
Bagay siya sa munggo.
No natural gas, no electricity, no water, nothing. For food, we rely entirely on the aid distributed in the tent city.
More than 1,000 buildings have collapsed here, and around 10,000 people lost their lives. Those who survived are now struggling. Only 25% of the city has water after pipes were heavily damaged. It will take days, if not weeks, to repair them. 60% of residents are living without electricity. None are getting natural gas. This was the largest stadium in Adıyaman. It has now been turned into a tent city that's home to more than 5,000 people. Turkey's Environment and Urban Planning Minister Murat Kurum told Al Jazeera that the government will provide people with more shelter and promised homes will be quickly rebuilt.
Now some parts of the city are provided with electricity and water. We are repairing the infrastructure of the city now. For natural gas, the process of damage assessment is continuing. Once we fix the pipes, public buildings such as hospitals, schools and buildings that are slightly damaged will be our priority to provide gas. We will rebuild the homes within a year.
Business here has also been disrupted, and most shops have either collapsed or are heavily damaged.
Sausawan ko,
What is left
lemon,
is your personal shop.
toyo, suka.
We've lost everything. Whatever we had in the shop is gone. We don't know how we will resume our business again, but at least my family is alive.
According to some reports, the earthquakes have already cost Turkey more than $80 billion in losses, or 10% of its gross domestic product. In Adıyaman, the scale of destruction is immense, and the displacement of survivors is becoming a humanitarian crisis.
Rescuers here are not hearing fewer voices from under the rubble. They are gradually shifting from finding bodies to clearing the debris and providing the essential goods and services to tens of thousands who have survived. Resul Serdar, Al Jazeera, Adıyaman, Southern Turkey.
Joining us from Istanbul is Hakan Akbaş. He's the Managing Director of Strategic Advisory Services. Many thanks for joining the program, sir. The scale of the destruction caused by this earthquake seems so immense. Do we have any idea yet of the economic impact?
Thank you so much for having me, and also I want to thank all your viewers for their amazing solidarity with Turkish people during this very difficult time. And the humanitarian loss has been overwhelming. Obviously, we need to move on and rebuild lives. According to early estimates, right now we would be looking at $84 billion of economic costs, and almost $70 billion of it would be in the infrastructure and the housing side, and around $14 billion in terms of lost manpower as well as impact to the GDP. I would expect probably up to 2 points of GDP growth from Turkish economy side this year alone. 1/3 of Turkey's steel manufacturing and exporting facilities actually have been built in this region, and they were not physically or operationally impacted, but they lost their employees. And from that perspective, they would be losing production probably. They would stay closed probably till the end of March. And on top of it, the Iskenderun port also has been impacted, which is a major energy and steel export port. This region it contributes to about 15% of Turkey's agriculture output. It will be impacted. On the production side, in addition to the steel industry, obviously textiles and logistic infrastructure also were impacted. From the exports perspective, even like Gaziantep, which was one of the worst hit cities, alone contributed to 5% of Turkey's exports. So
picking you up on the agricultural side of things, is that going to have an impact on food inflation, which Turkey has already been dealing with?
Yes, obviously at this point we have significantly more problems than inflation, but before these quakes, it contributed a great deal to the poverty and cost of living. The official number was about 65% annual inflation. Without any doubt, with this, it will impact the domestic agricultural output. Therefore, the supply should be hurt, and unfortunately, inevitably hurt the prices and also the cost of living in Turkey.
What sort of impact do you see on the housing
Safety ang
market?
ano
You
dito.
touched on it, but of course we've had this whole controversy
In
about building codes
kanila.
and so on. What impact exactly is it going to have on the housing market?
Just to share
Aluminum foil.
the magnitude and the scale, over 170,000 buildings have been impacted, and about 25 to 30,000 of them have been either basically gone or impacted. So rebuilding this whole region is going to be very important. But I think there is also the regulatory as well as the sort of the moral side of this story, because as late as in 2018, Turkey passed an amnesty law for all the zoning in the region, in the country, but also in the region, which is where basically you issue a building code, the building license to some part buildings. So this has really exposed the underpinnings of all the shady construction that has been going on for the last 20 years. And unfortunately, this is part of the populist moves on behalf of the government, or any government, to really issue these licenses in exchange for votes. And as you will know, Turkey was headed for elections on May 14, but that will surely have an impact on that as well.
As you say, massive reconstruction needed. Can Turkey afford what it's going to cost to rebuild these areas that have been destroyed?
Yes. Again, Turkey is a G20 country, and construction has always been one of the leading sectors in the economy. And also these numbers, although we're looking at tens of billions of dollars, with the support from domestic and international resources, organizations, they should be able to rebuild lives. It's going to take several years, and it's going to impact inevitably the economy, and all Turkish people, through our taxes, would be partially paying for this. But I think this is going to be one of the probably most manageable parts of this earthquake.
If you were a foreign investor looking at Turkey right now, how are you looking at Turkey in the short run and in the long run?
Look, this was probably one of the worst, deadliest disasters in the history of mankind. And from that perspective, this can happen to anybody. And as an investor, as a strategic investor, I would tend to look at the mid to long-term fundamentals of any country, including Turkey. So from that perspective, before the quake, obviously, it was a young, vibrant, resilient economy with a very hardworking and well-educated, basically, workforce. And also, the location of the country is very strategic as part of the customs union with the EU, as well as being literally a strategic point between East and West. And a very vibrant economy, as well as the infrastructure from telecom to education. It is still a highly long-term, high potential investment area, and also, especially these times, I think one would really look at the timing of the investments. And before these quakes, it was already probably one of the cheapest places in terms of asset prices in the world. So from a return on investment perspective, even before these quakes were there. So if for any long-term investors with a strategic game plan, Turkey is definitely, it needs to be put on the agenda.
Really interesting to talk to you. Hakan Akbaş, Managing Director of the Strategic Advisory Services, talking to us there from Istanbul. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me.
The situation in Syria is starkly different to that in Turkey. Little international aid has reached parts of the north. Most people there were already displaced because of the country's civil war. Now the earthquakes are compounding their misery. More than 4 million rely almost entirely on aid to survive. Aid workers have pleaded for help, but the UN has acknowledged it's failed to deliver. It's now appealed for nearly $400 million in aid and boosted deliveries to the area after getting permission from the Syrian president to use 2 more border crossings from Turkey. The UN was previously restricted to using just 1 border crossing approved by the Security Council for aid delivery. Other agencies and countries in the region have sent aid shipments by air to Damascus International Airport, but none have reached areas under opposition control. Joining us from Wellington in New Zealand is Karam Shah, an economist and non-resident fellow at the Middle East Institute. Thank you for joining the program, sir. Why has the international community been so slow to help Syria?
I think there's a combination of factors. One of the factors is the fact that the Assad regime has such a long history of diverting aid and stealing it at times. However, the situation in northwest Syria was different. That part which is held by the opposition received far less aid, not because aid is being diverted, although it is being diverted, but to a far lesser extent compared to regime-held Syria. But the response there was virtually non-existent because the United Nations refused to activate its emergency mechanisms and to deliver aid to people in that region without the permission of the Security Council or the Assad regime in Damascus. So the only crossing from Turkey into northwest Syria, which is Bab al-Hawa, the only crossing which was authorized by the UN for delivering aid was not accessible in the first few days, most critical for rescuing lives. In the
Okay
first
na?
few days of the earthquake.
Tapos na ako
So that meant
nagtanghalian.
the UN could not deliver aid altogether.
Ako'y magpapaalam na.
Now,
Shout out sa
the
lahat
response
ng
of other countries
nakakilala
also
sa akin.
bilaterally was,
Ako si
very
Budil Pinulit.
disappointing.
Magpapaalam.
Virtually no aid was
Hanggang
delivered
sa muli.
to northwest Syria, which is the
Bye-bye.
most vulnerable in the